In today's video, we'll become scientists to test the differences of drawing exactly the same thing, but within very different time frames. We'll draw the same thing in 10 minutes, 100 minutes, and with unlimited time. All to see how big of a difference time really makes and determine the sweet spot between good quality and time invested, if such a sweet spot exists. To do this, we'll start by planning what we're going to draw. Since this is all about unleashing our imagination and being as creative as possible, I thought of drawing something simple, but that could turn out really cool with enough time and detail.
16 times the detail.
The idea? 2 mushroom knights clad in plate armor, armed to the teeth, riding on top of a dinosaur. To add more depth to the image, this will be an action-packed battle scene where our 2 warriors are fighting against their enemy's army, another faction of mushroom warriors. In fact, one of their foes will already be lying defeated at the dinosaur's feet. Not only that, but our heroes will have personally claimed the head of the enemy king, now displayed as a war trophy. Finally, to complete the image, we'll add gear like satchels, backpacks, and some armor for the dinosaur, along with arrows dangerously piercing our protagonist's shield. So, with the plan in mind, our trusty digital tablet ready and the stopwatch set, we can begin. Let's roll Photoshop. I have to admit, I was a bit nervous at the start of this challenge. I've never really attempted something like this before in my journey as an artist, but I thought it could be fun to try. In fact, I wasn't even sure if 10 minutes would be way too little time to get a decent result. Spoiler alert, it goes wrong. But I wanted to find out for myself. I started by sketching the most basic shapes, fully aware that I wouldn't have time to refine the line art. So within this time frame, the sketch itself had to be the final piece. Time was slipping away far too quickly. There were barely 2 minutes left, and I didn't even feel like I had managed to create decent guidelines. The only thing I could do was go over the sketch to give it a cleaner look. So I focused on refining the outlines of the warriors, the dinosaur, and the defeated enemy. So here we have it, the 10-minute version of the plan we had in mind. But yeah, it's not exactly what I was hoping for. A quick glance reveals the lack of time, especially with those chicken scratch lines visible in the character silhouettes, particularly around the cape of the mushroom knight and the dinosaur's claws. On top of that, there are issues with, well, absolutely everything. The drawing falls short in terms of technique, perspective, and dynamism. Not even the storytelling and the composition can save it, as its poor execution makes it hard to understand. In fact, the defeated enemy on the ground looks more like a bag of chips. That brings us to the 100-minute drawing, where honestly, I was expecting a much better result. With 100 minutes to work with, I decided to plan my approach carefully, so I gathered some references to capture ideas and concepts. Medieval armor is incredibly complex, so those photos were definitely going to be a big help. Additionally, it would be very helpful to have references for a stereotypical medieval king's crown, as well as a medieval bladed weapon. Mushroom anatomy will be crucial for creating a more realistic depiction when it's time to draw those mushroom warriors. Finally, studying details of ropes or leather bags would greatly enhance the authenticity of the image. Great, we have the blank canvas ready, the timer set for 100 minutes, and we're good to go. "56 minutes left." That's how much time remained, and to be honest, I was a bit worried. I had already used half of the time, and was still working on a second sketch over the first one, trying to capture as many details as possible. Using references proved to be incredibly helpful. They allowed me to fill in the gaps in my mental library for those intricate details or complex objects, like the armor of the mushroom knights. The overlapping plates, multiple straps, and buckles turned this drawing into a challenging mental puzzle. At this point, I was finishing up shaping the armor, adding a helmet to the dinosaur. I ultimately decided it would keep its gaze locked on the viewer in a confrontational and threatening way as it roared. With only 30 minutes left, all I could do was refine the body of the beast a bit more. At the last moment, I decided to add a sort of fur inspired by modern scientific representations of how dinosaurs might have looked. I thought it was a cool touch that would add an extra layer of dynamism to the final result. And this brings us to the final stretch. Alright, this has been pretty fun to do. With the 100-minute drawing completed, we can draw a few conclusions. Honestly, I'm surprised by how little can be achieved in 100 minutes, or maybe I'm just really slow as an artist. I initially expected that in 100 minutes not only would all the planned elements be present, but they would also be detailed, clean, and well defined. Turns out I was wrong. While all the planned elements are indeed present, the line quality is still terrible, especially in this area of the dinosaur's armor. There's nothing about this drawing that makes me think it's more than just a sketch, not a polished or finished piece. However, there are clear improvements compared to the 10-minute drawing. A side-by-side comparison shows this well. The proportions of the Mushroom Knights are much more realistic, giving the impression of two defined characters rather than two bags of potato chips. The proportions and overall anatomy of the dinosaur have also improved. It no longer looks like a cartoonish toy, but rather a more animalistic and ferocious creature. Finally, the soldier lying defeated at the dinosaur's feet, while far from perfect, now at least resembles something humanoid. Overall, there's enough information for the composition to be narratively understandable, even if it's far from being a good piece. And now, all that's left is to face the final boss. The good thing is we can finally catch our breath and say goodbye to that countdown, which will help us feel a bit more relaxed. Canvas ready, digital tablet ready. Let's begin the final challenge. So here we have it, the unlimited time sketch. It probably took me around 4 to 5 hours to complete, and the difference is noticeable. This is likely the biggest leap in quality when compared to what we managed to achieve in 100 minutes. What stands out the most is probably the line quality, which I was able to refine as much as I wanted with unlimited time. I even highlighted some central elements with thicker lines to make them stand out against the more secondary ones. A side-by-side comparison with the 100-minute sketch shows improvement in, well, every aspect. Line quality, storytelling, composition, perspective, dynamism, and the emotional expression of the characters. As for the comparison with the 10-minute sketch, well, I think the difference speaks for itself. But why stop here? What could we achieve if we kept drawing for 10 more hours? Or 20? Or even more than 50 hours? You see, since we plan to depict a battle scene, I wanted to delve into historical paintings of the same theme to see what I could learn from them, something that could help me capture that tone or a specific detail to create something grounded and realistic. The horror of war. the anguish of its victims, the loss of human lives and animals, the mud. These are characteristics that are superbly represented in some of these works, and it's something I want to implement in my art, even if it's a surrealist concept. So, let's go for it. So here we go, starting the shading phase to render every detail of the drawing one by one and see just how far we can take it. I started simply with isolated elements, in this case, as you can see, the cap of the Mushroom Knight. This is also the perfect moment to add volume and texture, or even create new elements that you might have overlooked during the line art phase. The key here is patience and imagining each element as a 3D object, considering the direction of the light and how it interacts with the surface. Here I was rendering the shoulder plate of the knight. Honestly, I haven't rendered a lot of armor before, so shading the metal was definitely a challenge. However, I tried to approach it logically. The shoulder plate is basically shaped like a sphere, so I focused on where the light would bounce and where cast shadows would form. I think the result came out pretty convincing. For the other parts of the armor, the same principle applies. Subtle transitions between values don't work as well here. Because of its reflective nature, the highlights on the armor will catch a lot of light, while the areas without direct light will appear almost black. Here I'm rendering the face of one of the Mushroom Knights. I start with the larger areas, always keeping in mind where the light is coming from. Notice how I gradually add more light and shadow, which helps to shape the volumes and folds of the face. Now moving on to the cape, same process. I focus first on the larger elements, keeping the light source in mind. From there I'll add light and shadow, step by step, to bring out the details in the rendering. By the way, if you want to dive deeper into learning how to draw, watch this video. It's a tutorial that covers the most essential parts. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's see if we can get that little bitch of a follower counter to hit 1,000. Now, let's get back to the drawing. Nice, this looks promising. We just need to add the final touch of spice to have it ready. Like I said in one of my recent videos, this is Rocky, a cute little shaded rock, but it's sad because it's lacking something, an extra bit of spice. It has the shape and the shading, but it can be taken further, and that's where textures come in. If we take some pictures of real textures and use blending modes, we can give Rocky some hyper-realistic details to make it juicier. So this is exactly what we're going to do. Some liquid gruesome textures will work flawlessly as blood splatters on the character's halberd, while all the armor pieces will get their share of scratched metal textures, which I think look pretty cool and realistic. I'll do the same for the edge of the shield and the dinosaur's helmet, using rusted iron textures to emphasize that gritty, worn-out feel. For the dinosaur's pauldron, same deal. Scratched metal textures to emphasize that it's been through a hell of a lot. Some mud splatters here and there will complete the image, and for the fabric parts, I'll use cloth textures to enhance realism. Finally, a bit of dirt texture on the Mushroom Knights will add the final touch to the piece. And just like that, we are done. Great, challenge complete. It's been a huge effort to get here, but I think it was totally worth it. Now let's do one final comparison and see the differences. The jump from the shaded drawing to the refined sketch is already massive. I think we really managed to emphasize that 3D feel and make everything more tangible and realistic. In the clean line art, some details got lost, making it harder to distinguish them among all the lines. Everything felt flatter, less defined, and more difficult to read for the viewer. But in the final piece, all those details come together to define a solid volume, making it much easier to understand. Now, compared to the 100-minute drawing, the difference is insane. All the ideas are there, sure, but this comparison highlights how poorly executed some of them were, and how much work they still needed. The sense of tangibility is completely gone. It doesn't even feel remotely like a rendered 3D piece. And finally, the 10-minute drawing comparison is, well, interesting, to say the least. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of those side-by-side comparisons between max and low graphics settings in video games. In this case, the difference is clear. There aren't even properly established ideas, let alone well-defined ones. And as for the fallen soldier, well, we all know what that looks like. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.